The unexpected encounter. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the cargo bay of the merchant vessel Persistence, checking off items on her tablet with the methodical precision of someone who had done this exact task 300 times before. The ship hummed quietly around her as it drifted through space near Jupiter's outer moons, carrying everything from medical supplies to chocolate bars destined for the Europa mining station. 17 cases of coffee filters, check. 42 replacement air scrubbers, check. 137 packages of instant noodles. Sarah continued her inventory count, completely absorbed in her work. The Persistence wasn't much to look at, just a mid-sized cargo hauler with more dents than paint. But she was reliable, and Sarah took pride in her deliveries, arriving on time and complete. Commander Marcus Webb, her second-in-command, poked his head into the cargo bay. "Captain, we should reach Europa Station in about 4 hours. Their docking controller confirmed our approach vector." "Good," Sarah replied without looking up from her tablet. "Make sure Rosa checks the refrigeration units again. The mining crew gets cranky if their ice cream arrives melted." Marcus grinned. After 5 years of working with Sarah, he knew she took every delivery personally. It didn't matter if they were hauling medicine or luxury items, everything got the same careful attention. "Already done. Rosa says the temp control is working perfectly." Rosa Martinez, their engineer, was currently 3 decks down, elbow deep in the ship's main computer system. She had been tweaking their communication array all morning, trying to boost their signal range. The Persistence was an older ship, and keeping all its systems running smoothly required constant attention and creative solutions. What none of them noticed was the massive distortion building in space around them. The first sign of trouble was when Rosa's wrench started floating. She watched it drift past her face with the kind of mild confusion that came from spending too much time in zero gravity. "That's weird," she muttered, then shrugged and went back to her work. The second sign was when every alarm on the ship started screaming at once. Marcus rushed to the bridge, his feet barely touching the deck plates as emergency lighting bathed everything in red. "What's happening?" Jenny Park, their communications officer, was frantically working at her station. "Sir, I'm reading massive energy signatures all around us. Something big is happening." Through the main viewport, space began to twist and shimmer. Reality seemed to fold in on itself, and then massive shapes emerged from the distortion. 1 ship, then 10, then 20, then 50 enormous vessels materialized around the tiny Persistence, each one easily the size of a city block. The alien ships were works of art and terror combined. Their hulls were jet black with veins of pulsing blue energy running along their surfaces. Weapon ports glowed with menacing light, and their very presence seemed to make space itself feel smaller and more dangerous. Marcus stared at the alien fleet surrounding them, and did what any reasonable person would do in such circumstances. He pressed the ship's intercom button. "Captain Chen, to the bridge. We have a situation." Sarah's voice crackled back through the speakers. "What kind of situation?" "I'm in the middle of counting medical supplies. The alien invasion kind." There was a brief pause. "Is it urgent? These antibiotics won't count themselves." Marcus looked out at the 50 alien warships that could reduce the Persistence to cosmic dust with a single salvo. "I'd say moderately. Urgent? Fine, I'll be right there." On the flagship of the Kethmoran Confederation fleet, Supreme Overlord Vextheron stood 12 feet tall on his command bridge, his 4 arms crossed behind his back as he surveyed the pathetic little ship they had just surrounded. His skin was deep purple, almost black, with silver markings that indicated his high rank. Behind him, dozens of officers and technicians worked at stations filled with incomprehensible alien technology. "Report," Vextheron commanded in a voice that could shake mountains. Sub-Commander Krelter, a smaller alien with similar coloring, consulted his instruments. "Supreme Overlord, we have successfully intercepted a primitive vessel from the third planet. Our intelligence suggests this species has only recently achieved basic space travel." "Excellent." Vextheron's mandibles clicked together in satisfaction. "This will be a perfect opportunity to demonstrate the superiority of the Confederation to these primitives. Once they witness our power, word will spread throughout their species. They will surrender their entire star system without further resistance." The Kethmoran Confederation had conquered 17 different star systems using exactly this strategy. Find a lone ship from a primitive species, make an overwhelming show of force, and let the survivors spread word of their unstoppable power. It was efficient, effective, and minimized casualties on both sides. "Open a communication channel," Vex ordered. "Let us begin their education." Back on the Persistence, Sarah finally made it to the bridge. She took one look at the alien fleet surrounding them and nodded thoughtfully. "Well, that's new, Captain," Jenny said urgently. "They're trying to communicate with us. Put them through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the imposing figure of Supreme Overlord Vextheron in all his terrifying glory. His 4 arms gestured dramatically as he spoke in a language that sounded like grinding metal mixed with thunder. "Jenny, please tell me we have translation software," Sarah said calmly. "Working on it, Captain. The computer is analyzing their language patterns now." Jenny's fingers flew over her console. "Got it. Playing translation." The alien leader's voice boomed through the bridge speakers, now in accented but understandable English. "Primitive beings of the third planet, you stand before the might of the Kethmoran Confederation. I am Supreme Overlord Vextheron, conqueror of 17 worlds and master of 1,000 fleets." Sarah looked around the bridge. Marcus was trying very hard not to laugh. Rosa had just arrived from the engine room, wiping grease off her hands with a rag. Jenny was recording everything for the ship's log. "Your species has the honor of being the first to witness our power in this star system," the Supreme Overlord continued. "Surrender immediately, and your deaths will be swift. Resist, and your entire planet will burn." The bridge was quiet for a moment. Sarah checked her watch. "Excuse me, Supreme Overlord," she said politely into the communication system. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the merchant vessel Persistence. I appreciate you taking the time to contact us, but could we possibly do this in about 3 hours? I'm in the middle of inventory, and the Europa mining crew is expecting their supplies by 1600 hours. On the alien flagship, every officer on the bridge stopped what they were doing and stared at the communication screen. In all of Vextheron's years of conquest, no one had ever asked him to reschedule an invasion. Did she just ask us to wait?" whispered one of the junior officers. Vextheron's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of extreme confusion among his species. "I believe she did. Perhaps their translation is malfunctioning," suggested Sub-Commander Krelter. Before Vextheron could respond, the human female continued speaking. "I understand you're probably busy with the whole conquering thing, but we have a schedule to maintain. These miners work hard, and they depend on their deliveries. If you could just give us until, say, 1800 hours to finish our run, we could probably fit you in after that." The Supreme Overlord had conquered species that fled in terror. species that fought desperately, and species that tried to negotiate for their lives. He had never encountered a species that treated invasion as a scheduling conflict. Rosa, Captain Chen's voice continued. Are you listening to this? Can you believe they want to interrupt us in the middle of a delivery? A new voice, presumably Rosa, replied over the communication system. That's pretty rude, Captain. Don't they know we have a reputation to maintain? Rosa Martinez was indeed listening, but she was also looking at something interesting on her engineering tablet. The massive alien ships were putting out tremendous amounts of energy, and her sensors were detecting some unusual readings. Jenny, Rosa said quietly, are you getting electromagnetic interference from those ships? Jenny checked her instruments. Yeah, quite a bit. It's causing static in our communication array. That's not interference, Rosa realized. Those are distress signals. Their engines are overheating. Rosa had spent 15 years keeping older ships running with creative engineering and stubborn determination. She could recognize the signs of a failing power system from across the solar system. These alien ships might look impressive, but they were having serious technical problems. Captain, Rosa said, speaking up so the aliens could hear, I think their ships are breaking down. On the Kethmoran flagship, panic erupted on the bridge. How could they possibly know that? Krelter demanded. The truth was embarrassing. The Confederation's technology was indeed superior to anything humans had developed, but it was also incredibly ancient. Most of their equipment was thousands of years old, inherited from the original Kethmoran civilization. Their engineers spent most of their time trying to maintain systems they didn't fully understand, using techniques passed down through generations. The massive energy output required to maintain their fleet in formation was pushing their power systems beyond safe limits. They had been planning to complete this conquest quickly and return to base for maintenance. The last thing they expected was a species that wanted to chat about scheduling. Supreme Overlord, their chief engineer, reported, the human is correct. We are experiencing cascading power fluctuations across the fleet. If we don't reduce energy consumption soon, we risk system failures. Vexteran felt a headache coming on, which was particularly impressive since his species had 4 brains. Meanwhile, Sarah had returned to her inventory, leaving Marcus in charge of the alien situation. He watched the communication screen with the kind of fascination usually reserved for nature documentaries. So, Marcus said conversationally to the Supreme Overlord, while we're waiting, would you like to hear about our cargo manifest? We've got some really interesting items this trip. Before anyone could stop him, Marcus activated the ship's cargo database, broadcasting their complete inventory list to the alien fleet. The Kethmoran computers automatically began analyzing the data, trying to determine if it contained military intelligence. What they found instead was a comprehensive list of mining equipment, food supplies, entertainment media, personal hygiene products, and approximately 2,000 different types of spare parts for various human machines. The aliens stared at the data in bewilderment. This was not the kind of information they typically encountered during invasions. Sub-Commander, Vextherin said slowly, what exactly is toilet paper? Krelter consulted the ship's cultural database. According to our analysis, it appears to be a hygiene product related to waste elimination, and they have 4 cases of it. Yes, Supreme Overlord. Why would anyone need 47 cases of waste elimination supplies? Perhaps their digestive systems are highly inefficient. The conversation was interrupted by Rosa's voice coming over the communication channel. Hey, alien guys. I couldn't help but notice your power fluctuations. If you want, I could take a look at your engine efficiency algorithms. I've got some ideas that might help. Chief Engineer Vexkor, who had been struggling with the power problems for months, looked up from his station with desperate hope. Supreme Overlord, with respect, perhaps we should listen to her suggestions. Our current systems are challenging to maintain. Vextherin was beginning to feel like he had fallen into an alternate dimension where invasions involved scheduling conflicts and engine repair advice. Human engineer, he said carefully, are you offering to help us repair our vessels? Sure, Rosa replied cheerfully. I mean, you're going to be sitting there for a while anyway. Might as well fix what's broken. I'm transmitting some diagnostic routines that should help identify your problem areas. Within minutes, Rosa's simple diagnostic programs were providing more useful information about the Confederation's engine problems than their own engineers had gathered in months. The human solutions were crude but effective, focusing on practical repairs rather than theoretical perfection. As the aliens began implementing Rosa's suggestions, their power fluctuations stabilized for the first time in weeks. This is impossible, Vexkor muttered, staring at his readouts. How can such primitive technology be so effective? The answer was something the Kethmoran had forgotten in their thousands of years of using inherited technology. Sometimes, the best solutions came from people who had to make things work with limited resources and unlimited determination. Sarah's voice came over the communication system again. Supreme Overlord, we're about halfway through our inventory. Count, would you like some coffee while you wait? We always keep a pot brewing for long hauls. Vexteran looked around his bridge at officers who were staring at readouts showing improved engine efficiency, listening to offers of coffee from the species they were supposed to be conquering for the first time in his long career as a Supreme Overlord. He was beginning to think this invasion might not go according to plan. When stubbornness meets superior technology, 2 hours had passed since the Kethmoran Confederation had surrounded the merchant vessel Persistence, and Supreme Overlord Vex was experiencing something he had never felt before during a conquest. Curiosity. His fleet's power systems were running more efficiently than they had in months, thanks to the human engineer's suggestions. The primitive diagnostic tools she had shared were somehow more effective than the Confederation's ancient technology. It defied everything he thought he knew about primitive species. Supreme Overlord, reported Subcommander Krelter. The human vessel is moving. On the main screen, they watched the Persistence slowly turn toward Europa Station, completely ignoring the 50 warships surrounding it. Are they fleeing? Asked one of the junior officers hopefully. A fleeing enemy was much easier to understand than whatever this situation had become. Negative, Krelter replied, after checking his sensors. They appear to be continuing their original course. Captain Sarah Chen's voice came over the communication channel. Sorry about that, Supreme Overlord. We need to start our approach to Europa Station. The mining crew gets anxious if we're late, and anxious miners are cranky miners. Nobody wants cranky miners. Vexteran watched in amazement as the tiny cargo ship began flying directly through his formation, weaving between warships that could vaporize it without effort. The human captain was treating his mighty fleet like obstacles in a parking lot. Supreme Overlord, Chief Engineer Vexkor, called from his station. The human engineer is requesting permission to access our secondary power distribution network. She says she can improve our energy efficiency by another 12%. She wants access to our ship's systems. Vexteran couldn't hide his surprise. Does she not understand that we are her conquerors. Rosa Martinez's voice came through the speakers, slightly muffled by what sounded like her working inside some machinery. Look, big guy, your power distribution is about as efficient as a broken bicycle. You've got energy bleeding all over the place, redundant systems fighting each other, and what appears to be a cooling system designed by someone who never heard of thermal dynamics. On the engineering deck of the Persistence, Rosa was lying on her back under a maintenance panel, surrounded by tools and component parts. She had patched her tablet into the ship's communication system so she could talk while working. The way I see it, Rosa continued, you can either let me help you fix your problems, or you can keep flying around in ships that are held together with hope and prayer. Your choice. Vexgor looked pleadingly at his supreme overlord. The human was absolutely right about their technical problems, and her solutions were working better than anything they had tried in decades. Very well, Vexteron said reluctantly. You may access our secondary systems. Great. Oh, and while I'm in there, I'm going to fix that annoying whine in your artificial gravity generators. That must be driving everyone crazy. The bridge fell, silent. The artificial gravity generators had been making that particular noise for so long that most of the crew had learned to ignore it. The fact that the human had noticed it from her tiny ship was both impressive and embarrassing. Meanwhile, Commander Marcus Webb was having his own conversation with the aliens. He had appointed himself as the ship's diplomatic liaison, a role that primarily involved making small talk while Sarah finished her inventory. So, Marcus said conversationally, 17 worlds, that's quite impressive. What's your secret? Good marketing, aggressive expansion strategy, really effective travel brochures. Vextherin found himself actually thinking about the question. We demonstrate our superior technology and overwhelming force. Primitive species recognize our power and submit rather than face destruction. Ah, the shock and awe approach classic. But what happens after they surrender? I mean, you can't just leave fleets of warships sitting around conquered worlds forever. That's got to be expensive. It was, in fact, incredibly expensive. The Confederation's economy was struggling under the cost of maintaining occupation forces. Across 17 star systems, conquered species required constant monitoring, their populations had to be managed, and rebellions needed to be suppressed. The administrative overhead alone was staggering. We managed the transition carefully, Vexteron said, not wanting to admit that most of their conquered worlds were more trouble than they were worth. Have you considered trade partnerships instead? Marcus asked. I mean, if you've got superior technology, other species would probably be happy to exchange resources or services for access to it. Might be more profitable in the long run. Marcus added, we'd probably want some guarantees that you're not going to conquer us later. Bad for business, you understand. Vexteron looked around his bridge at officers who were monitoring the most efficient his fleet had run in years, listening to practical solutions for problems they had struggled with for decades. The humans' casual attitude toward their overwhelming military superiority was either the height of stupidity or the ultimate expression of confidence. Captain Chen, he said carefully, what makes you think we would honor such agreements? We could simply take your technology by force. Sarah's laugh came through the speakers. Supreme Overlord, you've had 50 warships surrounding one little cargo hauler for the past 3 hours, and instead of conquering us, you've been getting free engineering advice and learning about our supply chain management. I think we're going to get along just fine. The uncomfortable truth was that Sarah was right. Despite his overwhelming military advantage, Vextheron had found himself genuinely interested in these humans and their solutions to practical problems. Their approach to challenges was refreshingly direct compared to the Byzantine politics and ancient protocols that governed Confederation decision-making. Furthermore, Sarah continued, conquest is expensive. You have to maintain occupation, forces, suppress rebellions, manage populations that hate you, and somehow extract enough resources to make the whole operation profitable. Trade partnerships are much more cost-effective. Sub-Commander Krelter pulled up economic projections on his screen. Supreme Overlord, if the humans are correct about trade being more profitable than conquest, we could potentially save enormous resources across our current territories. Rosa Jenny Park's voice came over the communication system. We're getting a priority message from Earth Command. They want to know if we need backup. Tell them we're fine, Rosa replied, but they might want to send a diplomatic team. I think we're about to make some new friends. As the Persistence docked with Europa Station, Vextheron watched the mining crew begin unloading cargo with the same methodical efficiency that Captain Chen had shown during her inventory. The humans treated every task, from mundane deliveries to first contact with alien civilizations, with the same straightforward competence. Chief Engineer Vextheron ordered, compile a list of our most persistent technical problems. I want to see what other solutions these humans might suggest. Yes, Supreme Overlord. Should I also prepare specifications for potential technology exchange? Vextheron considered the question. 3 hours ago, he had been planning to add another conquered world to the Confederation's growing collection. Now he was considering whether these peculiar humans might be more valuable as partners than subjects. Yes, he said, finally. Prepare for extended negotiations. Captain Sarah Chen's voice came over the communication system one final time. Supreme Overlord, we've completed our delivery to Europa Station. If you're still interested in that conquest discussion, we have some time now. But I should warn you, Marcus has prepared a presentation about the benefits of interstellar trade agreements. It includes charts. Vextheron looked at his bridge crew, all of whom were operating more efficient systems thanks to human engineering advice. He thought about the economic projections showing the costs of conquest versus trade. He considered the possibility that there might be better ways to expand the Confederation than through military force. Captain Chen, he said, we would be honored to hear your presentation. And that was how the Kethmoran Confederation's first attempted conquest of the human species turned into their first interstellar trade negotiation, conducted by a cargo ship captain who refused to let alien invasion interfere with her delivery schedule. The humans, as it turned out, were just too stubborn to conquer properly. Asterisk.